I was 17 years old, standing in the pouring rain with nothing but a backpack, watching the door to my childhood home slam shut behind me. The reason? A lie my little brother told to save his own skin. My name is Madison Chen, and that night changed everything. But let me back up a little, because this story doesn't start with me getting kicked out. It starts with me being the good kid, honor roll student, never missed curfew, never caused trouble. My parents used to brag about having such a responsible daughter. Meanwhile, my younger brother David got away with everything because he was the baby, the charming one who could do no wrong in their eyes. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home, I learned early that being perfect wasn't enough. David could bring home C's and get ice cream for trying his best. I could bring home straight A's and get a lecture about how I should be helping David with his homework instead of being selfish. But I kept trying, kept believing that if I was just good enough, maybe they'd see me the way they saw him. The night that destroyed my family happened on a Tuesday in March 12 years ago. I was in my room studying for AP exams when I heard shouting downstairs. My parents had found a bag of weed in David's backpack, not a small amount either. We're talking about enough to get a teenager in serious trouble, especially in our conservative household where my father was a deacon at the local church. I remember creeping to the top of the stairs, listening to David sob dramatically as our parents demanded explanations. And then I heard it, the words that would haunt me for years to come. "It's not mine," David wailed. "Madison gave it to me. She said she'd hurt me if I didn't hold it for her." The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother's voice, cold and shocked. "Madison! Our Madison!" I ran downstairs, my heart pounding. "That's not true!" I shouted. "Mum, Dad, I've never even seen marijuana in my life. You know me. I don't even drink soda because I'm worried about my health." But David was already spinning his story, tears streaming down his face. He was always good at crying on command, a skill I never developed because I was too busy trying to be strong and independent. He told them I'd been acting weird lately, staying out late, which was a complete lie since I was always home by 9. He said I'd been hanging out with bad kids, also false, since my only friends were fellow honour students. "She threatened me," David sobbed, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "She said if I told on her, she'd make sure I got in trouble for everything. I was scared." I stared at my parents, waiting for them to remember who I was. The daughter who had never lied to them, never broken their rules, never given them a single reason to doubt my character. I waited for them to see through David's performance. Instead, my father's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Is this true, Madison?" "No," I screamed, my voice cracking. "How can you even ask me that? When have I ever lied to you? When have I ever done anything to make you think I'd do drugs?" My mother shook her head, tears in her eyes. "David wouldn't lie about something this serious. And you've been different lately, more secretive." "Different how?" I demanded. "Secretive about what? I tell you everything. I don't have secrets because I don't do anything wrong." But they'd already made up their minds. In their eyes, perfect little David couldn't possibly be capable of both using drugs and lying about it. It had to be me, the older sister, the one who should have been setting a better example, who must have somehow corrupted their innocent baby boy. The conversation spiraled from there. Every explanation I offered was met with skepticism. Every piece of evidence I presented, my clean record, my consistent behaviour, my complete lack of any drug-related contacts, was dismissed as proof of how well I'd been hiding my problem. "We raised you better than this," my father said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "How could you drag your brother into your mess?" I looked at David, hoping to see some crack in his facade, some hint of remorse, but he just stared back at me with those wide, innocent eyes that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. In that moment, I realized he actually believed his own lie. He'd convinced himself that sacrificing me was justified because he was the one who mattered. "I want you to pack a bag," my mother said quietly. "I can't have this influence in our house. Not with David's future at stake." "What?" I whispered. "You're kicking me out? For something I didn't do?" "This is for your own good too," my father added. "Maybe some time away will help you think about what you've done and get your life together." I stood there, 17 years old, watching my entire world collapse. These were the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone else in the world. They were supposed to protect me, believe in me, fight for me. Instead, they were choosing to believe a lie because it was easier than accepting that their golden child had disappointed them. "I have nowhere to go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You should have thought of that before you made these choices," my mother replied, though I could see her hands shaking as she said it. That's how I ended up standing in the rain at midnight, my entire life stuffed into a backpack, watching my childhood home disappear behind me. I spent that first night in an all-night diner, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to figure out what to do next. The waitress, a kind woman named Rita, eventually let me sleep in the back booth until morning. I kept thinking they'd call, that they'd realise they'd made a mistake and come looking for me. I imagined my phone ringing with my mother's voice, apologetic and worried, begging me to come home. I pictured my father showing up at the diner, ready to admit they'd been wrong and that they were sorry for doubting me. But the call never came. 12 years have passed since that night, and I've built an entirely different life. The scared 17-year-old girl who stood in that rain is gone, replaced by someone stronger than I ever imagined I could be. I worked 3 jobs while finishing high school, sleeping on couches and in youth shelters when I could find them. I applied for financial aid and scholarships with a determination that surprised even me. When Harvard Law School accepted me with a full ride, I felt a vindication that my parents would never give me. I graduated summa cum laude, not because I had to prove anything to them anymore, but because I'd learned to prove things to myself. Now, at 29, I'm one of the youngest partners at Morrison & Associates, one of New York City's most prestigious law firms. My specialty is family law, which seems fitting, given my own family's spectacular failure. I've helped hundreds of families navigate their worst moments, and maybe that's my way of processing what happened to me. My apartment on the Upper West Side has floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. I drive a Tesla, wear designer suits, and my refrigerator is covered with invitations to galas and charity events. It's the kind of life that the 17-year-old me dreamed about during those first terrible months on my own. But success doesn't erase the past, and it doesn't fill the hole where a family should be. Over the years, I've been systematically excluded from every major family event. 2 years ago, David got married in an elaborate ceremony that was posted all over social media. I found out about it through a mutual friend from high school who couldn't believe I hadn't been invited. When I sent a congratulations card to their family home, it came back marked "Return to Sender." I wasn't told when my grandfather died 3 years ago. I found out when I saw the obituary online while Googling my own name, a habit I'd developed since my career started taking off. The obituary listed David as his only surviving grandson. I drove to the cemetery after the funeral, stood alone at his grave and told him about law school, about my job, about how I'd kept the work ethic he'd taught me during summer visits. Every Christmas, I send cards. Every birthday, I send flowers. They all come back unopened. My parents have blocked me on social media, but I can see their posts through friends' accounts. They share pictures of family dinners, vacations, graduations, always with the same conspicuous absence. David and his wife, my parents looking proud and happy, surrounded by grandchildren I'll never meet. It's as if I simply stopped existing the night they threw me out. My friends tell me I should stop trying, that I should accept they've made their choice. My therapist says the same thing. But there's something in me that can't quite let go of the hope that someday they'll realise what they lost. Not because I need them anymore, I stopped needing them years ago, but because somewhere deep down I still remember being 7 years old and believing my parents were the wisest, kindest people in the world. The neighbours still ask David about his only child status when they see him visiting. He plays along perfectly, never mentioning that he once had a sister. My parents have gotten so good at pretending I don't exist that sometimes I wonder if they've convinced themselves it's true. But I know the truth and I've learned to live with it. I've built my own family from friends who became sisters, mentors who became father figures, and a career that gives me purpose. I've learned that blood doesn't automatically mean loyalty, and that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones most capable of breaking you. I thought I'd made peace with all of this. I thought I'd moved beyond caring what they thought or hoping they'd change their minds. I had my own life, my own success, my own happiness that didn't depend on their approval or acknowledgement. Then, 3 weeks ago, everything changed when my face ended up on the cover of Forbes magazine. The article was titled 30 Under 30, Legal Eagles Who Are Changing the Game. It featured a full-page photo of me in my corner office, with quotes about my rapid rise in the legal world and my work with pro bono family law cases. The article mentioned my background, how I'd overcome difficult circumstances as a teenager to build my career from nothing. I was proud of the recognition, but I didn't think much about how it might affect my old life. I'd learned not to hope that my achievements would somehow reach my family or change their opinion of me. I'd given up on the fantasy that they'd see my success and realise they'd made a mistake. But apparently, success has a way of travelling, even to people who've tried their hardest to forget you exist. 3 days after the Forbes article hit newsstands, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 12 years, but still recognised immediately, my mother's cell phone. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding like I was 17 again, standing in that rain. For 12 years I'd imagined this moment. I'd pictured what I'd say, how I'd react, whether I'd be angry or hurt or triumphant. But now that it was actually happening, I felt Nothing. Just a strange, hollow surprise. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to make them wonder and wait, the way I'd been wondering and waiting for over a decade. But curiosity won out. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Madison?" My mother's voice was exactly the same, soft, with that slight tremor she got when she was nervous. "Madison, honey, it's Mom." Honey. She called me honey like no time had passed at all, like she hadn't spent 12 years pretending I didn't exist. "I know who it is," I replied calmly. There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I saw your article in Forbes. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. You've done so well for yourself. We're proud." As if they'd had anything to do with it. As if they'd been cheering me on from the sidelines instead of erasing me from their lives completely. "Thank you," I said, because I couldn't think of anything else to say that wouldn't immediately escalate into a fight. "Madison, I was thinking, it's been so long, too long. Maybe we should talk in person as a family." As a family, the words hit me like a physical blow. For 12 years, they'd made it clear I wasn't part of their family. Now, suddenly, I was family again? "What changed?" I asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what changed between 3 weeks ago when you wouldn't even accept a Christmas card from me and today when you want to talk as a family?" Another long pause. "Madison, we miss you. We've always missed you. Maybe it's time to put the past behind us and move forward. You're successful now. You've clearly learned from your mistakes." My mistakes. Even now, even after 12 years, she couldn't say the words. She couldn't admit that they'd been wrong, that they'd chosen to believe a lie, that they'd thrown away their daughter for nothing. "I have to go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Wait, Madison, please, can we meet? Can we talk about this properly?" I hung up without answering. That phone call opened floodgates I'd thought were permanently sealed. 2 days later, David called. His voice was deeper now, more confident than the scared teenager who'd destroyed my life. But I recognized it immediately. "Madison, it's David, your brother." My brother, as if that meant something after all these years. "I know who it is," I said, echoing my response to our mother. "Look, I saw the Forbes thing. That's incredible what you've accomplished. I always knew you were smart." He paused, and I could hear the calculated nature of his words. This wasn't a spontaneous call. He'd rehearsed this. "I was thinking we should reconnect. We're family, you know, and actually, I've got this business opportunity that might interest you." There it was, the real reason for the call. Not guilt, not love, not a desire to make amends. Business opportunity. "What kind of business opportunity?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Well, you know I've been running this import company for the past few years. It's doing well, but I'm looking to expand, and I could really use someone with your legal expertise. And maybe some investment capital. I thought, since we're family and everything." Family. Again with that word they'd forgotten the meaning of 12 years ago. "How much?" I asked bluntly. "How much what?" "How much money do you need, David?" He laughed awkwardly. "Come on, it's not just about money. I want to reconnect with my sister." "But if you're interested in investing, I could probably use around $500,000 to really take things to the next level." $500,000 That's what my family relationship was worth to him. A business loan from the sister they'd discarded. "I'll think about it," I lied and hung up. But I didn't just think about it. I did what I do best. I investigated. When you're a lawyer specializing in family disputes, you develop a network of investigators and contacts who can find out anything about anyone. Within a week, I had a complete picture of my family's current situation, and it wasn't pretty. David's import business was failing badly. He owed money to suppliers, landlords, and the IRS. His credit was shot, his assets were leveraged to the hilt, and he was about 6 months away from declaring bankruptcy. His wife had been posting increasingly desperate subliminal messages on social media about financial stress and marriage problems. My parents weren't doing much better. Dad had retired early due to health issues, and Mum had never worked outside the home. Their retirement savings had been depleted helping David with his various failed ventures over the years. Apparently, there had been several businesses before this one, all funded by their dwindling nest egg. They needed money, and they'd seen my success splashed across a national magazine. Suddenly, the daughter they'd pretended didn't exist had become their potential salvation. But here's the thing they didn't know. I'd been keeping track of them too, all these years. Not through investigators, but through mutual friends, old neighbours, and the occasional social media stalking session. I knew about David's business failures, about Dad's heart attack 3 years ago, about Mum's struggle with depression after her own mother died. I'd wanted to reach out during all of those crises to offer help or support or just acknowledgement that I cared. But every time I'd tried, I'd been shut out. Every card returned, every call blocked, every attempt at contact rejected. Now they wanted to reconnect because they needed something from me. Not because they missed me, not because they'd realised their mistake, not because they'd spent 12 years regretting their decision. Because they saw dollar signs in that Forbes article. The realisation should have made me angry, but instead it just made me tired. Tired of hoping, tired of caring, tired of that 17-year-old girl inside me who still believed her parents might love her enough to admit they'd been wrong. That's when my friend Sarah intervened. Sarah and I had been friends since law school, and she'd heard the whole saga of my family drama over many late-night study sessions and post-breakup wine binges. She was one of the few people who knew the complete truth about why I'd been on my own since I was 17. "You know what this is, right?" she said when I told her about the phone calls. We were sitting in my apartment, sharing Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine that cost more than I used to make in a week at my teenage jobs. What is?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "This sudden interest in reconnecting. Madison, they don't deserve you. They never did." Sarah had strong opinions about my family, opinions she'd been holding back for years out of respect for my complicated feelings. "You built an incredible life without them. You don't owe them anything." "They're still my family," I said weakly, hating how pathetic it sounded even as I said it. "No, they're not," Sarah replied firmly. "Family doesn't throw you away when you're 17 because it's easier than admitting their precious son lied. Family doesn't ignore you for 12 years and then show up when they need money. That's not family, that's opportunism." I knew she was right, but knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two very different things. Some part of me still wanted to believe that underneath their terrible timing and obvious financial motivations, my parents genuinely missed me and regretted what they'd done. But I was about to learn just how wrong I was about their motivations and just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted from me. A week after my conversation with Sarah, the calls became more frequent and more desperate. My mother started leaving voicemails, her voice getting progressively more emotional with each message. "Madison, honey, please call me back. I know we have things to work through, but we're family. Family forgives. Family moves forward together." My father left exactly one voicemail, his voice gruff and uncomfortable. "Madison, your mother is very upset. Whatever happened in the past, we need to put it behind us. You're our daughter, and it's time you came home." David's approach was different. He started sending me business proposals via email, glossy presentations full of buzzwords and projected profits. Each one ended with a personal note about how much he missed his big sister and how excited he was to work together as a family. The word family had become their weapon of choice, deployed strategically in every communication. They wielded it like it was supposed to erase 12 years of rejection and abandonment, like it was a magic word that would make me forget everything they'd done. But I wasn't the same desperate 17-year-old they'd thrown away. I was a lawyer now, trained to see through manipulation and recognize patterns of behavior. And the pattern here was crystal clear. They needed me, so suddenly I mattered again. Still, there was a part of me that wondered if I was being too cynical. Maybe they really had missed me. Maybe seeing my success had made them realize what they'd lost. Maybe this was their clumsy attempt at reconciliation, poorly timed but genuinely meant. That naive hope died completely when my private investigator called with information that changed everything. "Ms. Chen," Jake Morrison said over the phone. Jake was a former NYPD detective who'd helped me with several cases, and I'd hired him to dig deeper into my family's finances. "I've got some information you're going to want to hear. Can we meet in person?" An hour later, Jake was sitting across from my desk, spreading documents and photographs across the mahogany surface. "Your brother's in deeper trouble than I initially thought," he said without preamble. "The import business is just the latest in a string of failed ventures, all funded by your parents. But that's not the interesting part." He slid a printed transcript across the desk. "This is from a conversation David had with a business associate last week. My contact was wearing a wire for an unrelated investigation, but David's voice is clear as day." I picked up the transcript, my hands surprisingly steady despite the dread building in my stomach. The conversation was mostly about business, but near the end, David's associate asked about his funding problems. "Don't worry about it." David's voice came through clearly on the recording. "My sister just made partner at some big law firm in New York. She's loaded now. I'll get the money from her." "I thought you said you didn't have any siblings," the associate replied. "Yeah, well, it's complicated. We had a falling out when we were younger. I might have let her take the blame for some trouble I got into, but she's family, right? She'll come through." The associate laughed. "Dude, that's cold. What if she says no?" "She won't," David replied confidently. "She's been trying to reconnect with us for years, sending cards, flowers, all that pathetic stuff. She'll probably cry tears of joy when we finally let her back into the family. And once she's back in, she'll do anything to stay. Guilt's a powerful motivator." My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I looked up at Jake, who was watching me carefully. "There's more," he said gently. "Your parents' conversations are even worse." He slid another transcript across the desk. This one was from a recording device planted in my parents' car during a visit to David's house. "I still think this is wrong," my mother's voice said. "She's our daughter, Richard. We threw her away." "She made her choice when she got involved with drugs," my father replied firmly. "We didn't throw her away. We tried to save our family from her destructive influence." "But what if she wasn't—" "Don't," my father interrupted sharply. "We've been over this 1,000 times, Linda. David wouldn't have lied about something that serious. Madison was heading down a bad path, and we did what we had to do." There was a long pause before my mother spoke again. She looked so scared that night, standing there in the rain. "Stop it," my father said. "You'll make yourself sick thinking about it. Besides, look how well she turned out. Maybe being on her own was exactly what she needed. And now she can help her family when we need it most." "It just feels like we're using her," my mother said quietly. "We're not using her. We're giving her a chance to be part of this family again. That's what she's always wanted, isn't it? She should be grateful we're willing to let bygones be bygones." I set the transcript down and stared out my office window at the New York skyline. 12 years of wondering, 12 years of hoping, 12 years of believing that somewhere deep down they loved me and regretted their choice. All of it destroyed by a few paragraphs of recorded conversation. They didn't think they'd made a mistake. They still believed David's lie, still convinced themselves they'd been right to kick me out. My father had rewritten history in his mind so completely that he genuinely believed my success vindicated their decision to abandon me. And my mother, the woman who gave birth to me, who used to read me bedtime stories and kiss my scraped knees, knew I'd looked scared that night in the rain and still went along with their current plan to use me for money. "There's one more thing," Jake said, sliding a final document across the desk. "David's been telling people you've already agreed to invest in his business. He's been using your name to secure additional loans, claiming he has a wealthy lawyer sister backing his ventures." That was the final straw. Not only were they planning to manipulate me emotionally, but David was already using my reputation to commit what amounted to fraud. If his business failed and creditors came looking for the money he'd promised them, my name would be attached to his debts. "Thank you, Jake," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Send me your bill." After he left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Manhattan. I thought about that 17-year-old girl standing in the rain, believing her parents would realize their mistake and call her home. I thought about all the birthday cards I'd sent that were returned unopened, all the times I'd driven by our old neighborhood, hoping for a glimpse of them, all the nights I'd wondered if they ever missed me. They hadn't missed me at all. They'd been grateful I was gone, convinced they'd made the right choice. Living happily as a family of 3 while I built my entire life from nothing. But now they wanted me back, not as a daughter, but as a walking ATM machine with an emotional vulnerability they could exploit. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my mother again. This time, I answered on the first ring. "Hello, Mom." "Madison, The relief in her voice was palpable. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you answered. I was starting to worry that you were avoiding us." "Just busy with work," I said neutrally. Of course. You're so successful now. We're just so proud. Listen, your father and I were thinking, why don't we meet for dinner this weekend? Somewhere nice. We have so much to catch up on." "What about David?" I asked. "Will he be there too?" "Oh yes, he's so excited to see you again. He's been telling everyone about his successful sister, how proud he is of what you've accomplished." Proud of what I'd accomplished. The same brother who'd destroyed my life to save himself, who was now bragging about me to secure fraudulent loans, was proud of me. "That sounds wonderful," I said, injecting warmth into my voice. "I'd love to see everyone again." "Really?" My mother's surprise was genuine. "Oh, Madison, this makes me so happy. We've missed you so much." "I've missed you too," I replied, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I had missed them, or at least I'd missed the people I thought they were before I learned the truth. "How about Saturday night? There's this lovely restaurant downtown, Romano's, very upscale, the kind of place where successful people like yourself probably eat all the time." I almost smiled at that. They were already trying to butter me up, appealing to my supposed sophistication and success. "Saturday night sounds perfect. I'll make a reservation." "Oh, you don't have to. I insist," I said firmly. "Let me treat my family to dinner. It's the least I can do after all these years." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and started planning. If they wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd play them better than they ever could, because unlike them, I'd spent 12 years learning to survive in a world where people couldn't be trusted to tell the truth. I called Romano's and made a reservation for 4. Then I called Jake back and gave him very specific instructions about what I needed for Saturday night. The week passed slowly. I found myself rehearsing conversations, imagining different scenarios, preparing for every possible reaction. Part of me hoped that when I saw them in person, something would change. Maybe the recordings were taken out of context. Maybe they really had missed me and the financial motivation was just unfortunate timing. But deep down, I knew better. I'd learned to trust evidence over hope, facts over wishful thinking. And the facts were clear. My family wanted my money, not my presence. Saturday night arrived grey and rainy, fitting, considering the weather on the night they'd kicked me out. I chose my outfit carefully, a black designer dress that had cost more than my family used to spend on groceries in a month, paired with jewellery that caught the light just right. I wanted to look successful, untouchable, and expensive. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd given up. Romano's was exactly the kind of restaurant my parents had never been able to afford when I was growing up. The kind of place where entrees started at $50 and the wine list required a sommelier to navigate. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited at our table, positioned strategically so I could watch the entrance. They walked in together at exactly 7 o'clock. My parents flanking David like protective bookends. For a moment, seeing them felt like looking at ghosts. My father had gone completely grey and looked smaller somehow, diminished by age and stress. My mother had gained weight and wore too much makeup, as if she was trying to recapture a youth that had slipped away while I wasn't looking. But it was David who shocked me most. The scrawny teenager who'd cried his way out of trouble had grown into a confident man in an expensive suit. He walked with swagger, shaking hands with the maitre d' like he owned the place, clearly playing a role for my benefit. They spotted me and approached the table, their faces arranged in carefully practiced smiles. "Madison," my mother breathed, reaching out as if to hug me before stopping awkwardly. "You look incredible, so sophisticated." "Thank you," I said, standing to greet them. "You all look wonderful too." My father cleared his throat. "This is quite a place, very upscale." "I thought you'd like it," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. "I eat here fairly regularly. The salmon is exceptional." As we settled into our seats, I watched them take in the surroundings, the crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the servers in crisp uniforms. I could see them calculating costs, impressed despite themselves by the obvious expense. "So," David said, leaning forward with that charming smile I remembered from our childhood, "tell us everything. How did you end up so successful? I always knew you were smart, but this..." He gestured around the restaurant. "This is incredible." "It wasn't easy," I said, accepting the wine list from our server. "Especially those first few years. Being on my own at 17 was quite an adjustment." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I could see my parents exchanging glances, clearly hoping I wouldn't dwell on the circumstances of my departure. "But you figured it out," my mother said quickly. "Look at you now, a partner at a law firm living in New York City. We're so proud of what you've accomplished." "Are you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because for 12 years, you've acted like I don't exist. You've returned my cards, blocked my calls, excluded me from every family event. That doesn't seem like pride to me." Another uncomfortable silence. My father cleared his throat again, a nervous habit I'd forgotten about. "Madison, we know things have been strained between us," he said carefully. "But that's in the past now. What matters is that we're here together, as a family." "What changed?" I asked, the same question I'd posed to my mother during that first phone call. "What made you suddenly want me to be part of the family again?" "We've always wanted you to be part of the family," David said smoothly. We thought you needed time to mature, to get your life together, and clearly you have." I almost laughed. The lies came so easily to him, so naturally. He'd had 12 years to perfect his version of events, to convince himself that throwing me away had been for my own good. "Let's order," I said instead, opening my menu. "I'm starving." Dinner conversation was surreal, a carefully choreographed performance where we all pretended the past 12 years hadn't happened. They asked about my job, my apartment, my life in New York, but only in the context of my success and wealth. They weren't interested in the loneliness, the struggles, the years of therapy it had taken to rebuild my self-worth after my own family had thrown me away like garbage. They told me about David's business, painting it as a thriving enterprise with unlimited potential. They mentioned their retirement, their health issues, the challenges of getting older in an uncertain economy. Everything was carefully framed to emphasize their needs while highlighting my ability to help. It wasn't until dessert arrived that David finally made his pitch. "You know, Madison, I've been thinking about what you said on the phone about business opportunities," he began, pulling out his phone to show me charts and projections. "I really think there's potential for us to work together. Family businesses are the strongest kind of businesses, you know." "Are they?" I asked, taking a bite of chocolate cake that tasted like ash in my mouth. Absolutely. Trust, loyalty, shared vision, those are the foundations of success. And think about it. We could finally be the team we were always meant to be. Brother and sister, working together, building something amazing. He was good. I had to give him that. His pitch was polished. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, and he'd clearly put thought into making it sound like a partnership rather than a bailout. It sounds interesting, I said, setting down my fork. But I have to ask, David, do you remember why I left home 12 years ago? The question hit the table like a physical blow. The carefully maintained facade cracked, and I could see panic flash across all three faces. Madison, my mother said quickly, there's no need to rehash old... No, I think there is, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and level. I think it's very relevant to any potential business partnership. David, do you remember what happened that night? David's jaw tightened, but he maintained eye contact. We were kids, Madison. Kids make mistakes. What matters is who we are now. Kids make mistakes, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call it? Look, my father interjected, whatever happened back then, we're all adults now. We can move past it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder, placing it on the table between us. The sight of it made all three of them freeze. I want to play something for you, I said, pressing play. David's voice filled the space between us, clear and unmistakable. I might have let her take the blame for some trouble I got into, but she's family, right? She'll come through. The colour drained from David's face. My parents stared at the recorder like it was a weapon pointed at their hearts. She's been trying to reconnect with us for years, David's recorded voice continued, sending cards, flowers, all that pathetic stuff. She'll probably cry tears of joy when we finally let her back into the family. And once she's back in, she'll do anything to stay. Guilt's a powerful motivator. I stopped the recording and looked around the table at my family, if I could even call them that anymore. My mother was crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 30 seconds. David was staring at his hands, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Pathetic, I said quietly. That's what you called my attempts to reconnect with my family. Pathetic. Madison, David started, but I held up my hand to stop him. I have more recordings, I said. Your parents discussing how they still believe your lie after all these years. Your father explaining how throwing me out was the right decision. Your mother admitting she knows you're using me for money, but going along with it anyway. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice broken and small. We're sorry, she whispered. We're so sorry. For which part? I asked. For believing David's lie 12 years ago? For throwing me out when I was 17? For ignoring me for over a decade? Or for only contacting me now because you need money? All of it, she said, tears flowing freely now. All of it. We made terrible mistakes and we've regretted them every day. Have you? I asked. Because the recordings suggest otherwise. They suggest you've been quite happy living as a family of 3, congratulating yourselves on making the hard but necessary choice to get rid of me. My father finally found his voice. What do you want from us, Madison? What would it take for you to forgive us? I looked around the table at these 3 people who shared my DNA but had never really been my family. The 17-year-old girl inside me wanted to hear them beg, wanted them to grovel and plead and finally give me the acknowledgement I'd craved for so long. But the adult I'd become, the successful, independent woman who'd built a life from nothing, felt only exhaustion. "I don't want anything from you," I said, standing up and placing $300 on the table to cover dinner. 12 years ago, you made it clear that I wasn't part of this family. You were right then, and you're right now. I'm not part of this family, and I never will be. "Madison, please," my mother reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "We can work through this. Families forgive each other. We can start over." "You keep using that word," I said. "Family." "But families don't throw their children away when it's convenient and then try to reclaim them when they need something. That's not family. That's opportunism." David finally looked up, his face flushed with shame and anger. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away after everything we've been through?" I almost laughed. "Everything we've been through? David, we haven't been through anything together. You destroyed my life to save yourself 12 years ago. And then you all spent the next 12 years pretending I didn't exist. The only reason I'm here tonight is because you saw $signs in a magazine article." "That's not true," my father protested. "We've missed you. We've thought about you." "No, you haven't," I replied firmly. "And that's okay. You made your choice 12 years ago, and it was probably the right choice for you. David got to be the golden child without any competition. You got to have a simple, uncomplicated family dynamic. Everyone got what they wanted." "What about what you wanted?" my mother asked through her tears. "What I wanted was a family that would believe me when I told the truth," I said. "What I wanted was parents who would fight for me instead of throwing me away at the first sign of trouble. What I wanted was a brother who wouldn't sacrifice me to save himself." I picked up my purse and looked at them one last time. But I learned to live without those things. I learned to be my own family, and I've been happier without you than I ever was with you. As I walked toward the restaurant exit, my mother's voice followed me. "Madison, please don't leave like this. We love you." I stopped and turned back, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. 3 people sitting at an expensive table, crying over the loss of a relationship they'd never valued until they needed something from it. "No, you don't," I said simply. "You love what I can do for you now. But you've never loved me enough to believe in me, support me, or choose me when it mattered. And that's something that can't be fixed with apologies or family dinners." I walked out into the rainy New York night, leaving them behind forever. As I stood on the sidewalk waiting for my Uber, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The 17-year-old girl who'd spent 12 years hoping for this reconciliation was finally gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. My phone buzzed with text messages, apologies, pleas, promises to change. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Some families are better left behind. And some mistakes, like believing people can change when they've never acknowledged they were wrong in the first place, aren't worth repeating. I had built a beautiful life without them, and I was going to keep living it exactly as I chose. surrounded by people who had earned the right to be called family through their actions, not their genetics. For the first time in 12 years, I felt completely free.